Watch this. No way!
Welcome to the podcast. An absolute joy to get you guys on. Really enjoyed chatting to you guys when feels like ages ago now. When did we record the podcast, which I would highly recommend people to jump over and listen to, by the way? When did we record that?
5 or 6 weeks ago, I think.
Yeah, it feels like ages ago.
I think Christmas has been since, so you kind of...
Christmas was coming up because we did the dirt. So Henry
You're
Walker,
right.
who's gonna tell us about the dirt? Because that was what I was terrified about doing, to be fair, on your podcast.
Yeah, so the dirt is something that we came up with as a little starter to the podcast. That it began as just so Walker and I have a segment called Mudball Monday, where we get on every Monday, and it's quite literally what it sounds like. It is a mudball. We don't know what we're going to talk about. It can go any sort of direction. Sometimes we have a concept, and sometimes we do ones like we recorded today, where we did just exclusively the dirt, which is what we have been drinking, eating, reading, and thinking in the last week or so. And so we each take those 4 letters and just kind of bat it around for 10 minutes, or in today's case, about 45 minutes about those 4 things. Mm. So yeah, the exclusive dirts, we've just started trying that, and I'm really intrigued to see how that goes. People have taken really well to the concept. We keep hearing, like, we love the dirt. We like hearing you guys talk about that stuff. And so we kind of have taken that and run and said, okay, well, here come some episodes where that's all we're going to do. So we will see how that goes. But
the audience,
yeah, that's the
forgiving.
premise.
So they sort of stick with that, because I should add, you guys are a golf podcast. Like, the tie is a golf podcast. So, do they stick with that even, or does it tangentially kind of flow into golf, or do you just stick solely on the process of making coffee, the great stuff you've been cooking, all that kind of good stuff?
That's a good question. I would say every 5th to 10th podcast, my thinking might go in the direction of golf. But
You are not thinking about golf enough. That is just not enough. I'm going to throw it out there.
by and large, it does not include a lot of golf. So yeah, seemingly people are pretty interested in what we have to say about just other sort of random stuff. But Tom, that's a good call out. If we are quote unquote a golf podcast, I probably should be thinking a little bit more about golf. But
I think probably 10% of the time I might be off golf. 90% of the time I'm thinking about how I'm going to stop shanking the ball, or maybe how I kill my duck hooks. It's usually about my golf. But
that was going to be my next question, but I like that.
Yeah, that's dead on. Tom, how long have you been in that state of mind? Has that been a forever thing, or is this a phase?
well, interesting. We got right back in the early days. This is weird. I feel like we've been interviewed. When we got right back in the early days, we got Gio Valiante on, the sports psychologist. He talked about flow state, about how you can get into that flow state where you don't need to think about golf. Well, I've never met flow state. I don't know who he is, so I have to think about my golf pretty much all the time if I'm even going to try and succeed, and it's usually met with failure, if I'm perfectly honest. But let's talk about you boys, because we've done me plenty on this podcast. You are a podcast, the Thai podcast. You started when?
We started, I think it was June 2020. Henry, does that sound right?
I believe it was 21. Yeah, June 21. We're moving into 2 years here, but still haven't crossed the 2-year mark.
Okay, what was the reasoning behind it? Why did you feel like you wanted to get into golf podcasting?
I mean, Henry and I played golf in high school. We actually met prior to even us playing golf primarily as a sport. And the two of us met and started practicing and playing together over a course of time, into our college years. We talked a lot about golf offline and when we were playing golf, but we had just assembled a bunch of photos from playing golf and just having experiences. And we started throwing up those photos on Instagram. That was kind of a common thing to do. There were lots of other folks sharing photos of golf. I was mildly interested in golf course architecture at the time. We were having conversations about what we enjoyed playing recreationally, what we enjoyed playing competitively, and very much still learning about the game. And I would say that's when our interest was there, and we matched that with just kind of putting a product out, even though there wasn't really much to offer. And kind of at that point, kind of got connected into the golf sphere, whether it was golf Twitter or golf Instagram, which do have their differences. But ever since then, it's been this continuous ongoing conversation between the two of us. And it has very much evolved through competition, through playing in college, through my own interest in architecture. And the podcast seems like another phase of that process. But it's been perhaps the most enjoyable so far.
Do you feel like it's two-way? What I mean by that, do you feel like, I guess it's good to be able to kind of talk about golf and release content, and there's some maybe gratification around that, but also it's like an education in and of itself almost. Certainly that's how we find it.
Yeah, Henry, feel free to come in here if you want to share any more context, but the idea behind the name, the tie, is that golf in and of itself seemed like something with an end. And what really felt endless was talking to people within the game and hearing how they viewed it differently than us, how they were raised differently within the game, how they caught the game at a certain portion of their life, and how golf can still represent a very minor portion of your life, but it can have an impact, a big impact at times in other areas. And so the podcast was an extension of us already being interested in that piece. And the name, The Tie, was really behind trying to uncover some of those thoughts that we had just through letting other people explain that whole concept.
By all accounts, we've got a pair of ball strikers on our hands. Are you two both fairly handy? Have you been in the
when
amateur
you say
circuit?
College golf, it's like eyes light up. You think Tom's almost close to start sending you swing videos here for some sort of help. I think it could turn into a therapy session for him.
I heard some past tense used there, which is very, very apropos to the conversation. There was a time when we were both half decent at the game. That time is not now. Those days are much behind us. But yeah, we still enjoy getting out there and kicking it around. We're both getting into the mid-amateur age, and so a lot of possibilities to be held there. So we do really enjoy some competitive golf, and have certainly played a bit in our past.
You're very modest, though, aren't you? I mean, obviously, when we record the podcast, I kind of get that sense. Very modest about your own playing abilities. I don't want to put you on the spot and make you say how great you were, but is there a difficult adjustment, do you find, coming out of playing maybe collegiate golf, and I don't know where that was and to what level, and then realizing maybe that it's not going to be the full-time job, but actually, do you learn to enjoy it differently? Do you learn to enjoy it more or less? Because it must be such a strange adjustment. There's nowhere near the same level of kind of college level golf played over in this country. There's some universities where there'd be some high-end players, but by and large, I think if you really want to make it in the top tier, a lot of people are going to go out and play in that American sort of collegiate system, ideally D1 and stuff. But yeah, not everyone makes it, and only a small percentage. What's that adjustment like? And I guess you've got a wider peer group as well, right?
I'll spin it slightly and say that, and to this day, I was actually just playing golf at a par 3 course about an hour ago with a friend, and was essentially asked this sort of question. And he kind of said to me, he was like, why did you not want to turn pro? Like he was asking me about some of my friends and peers and people, and just calling it like it is. Like I was referring to people that I used to compete against who are now playing on the PGA Tour. They're playing at Pebble Beach this week, and asking me, okay, so why did you not choose that path? And honestly, I don't have a great answer there. It was never, if I had a great answer, I would say it, but it just never was what I really wanted to do, to be completely honest. And so I kind of started to feel this in myself, like probably about 2.5 years ago. I was, as I was kind of encroaching on that last stretch of college golf, recognizing that even though on paper and, rankings wise and some of those sorts of things probably would have expected me to think about going and play professional golf, I just knew that I would rather go get a regular job, pursue other things in life, but continue to compete. And so with that, I started to think about, okay, well, if this is something that I do want to do for a long time, but maybe not so much as a profession, how should I think about it a little bit differently? And that, this is kind of in lockstep with the podcast, but starting to think about, okay, well, competitive golf, maybe it's not something that I want to do to cash my bill paying checks. Maybe we'll cash a couple checks here and there, especially when Walker and I get on the course. But nonetheless, like thinking about competitive golf is something that I'm truly passionate about, and enjoying that experience alongside architecture and the culture of the game and all of those different sorts of things. So I don't know if that's a great answer, but I did always feel that when it comes to college golf, I mean, yes, 99 out of 100 guys that you play with, especially at the top levels, are absolutely trying to play as a professional. But I think that, yeah, there was a bit of a disenchantment on my end of, guys that were maybe a junior in school and didn't feel as if they were quite on that path. They wanted to do it, but they could kind of see the writing on the wall that it wasn't going to work out. And it just feels like a lot of those guys end up not really liking the game all that much. I kind of decided to just like spin that on its head and say, you know what? I've known that this probably isn't what I want to do as a profession, but I do really enjoy competing. So let me just come out here and have like a ton of fun when I'm playing competition. And I think honestly that if there's any sort of like later career amateur success that I had, I think a lot of it had to do with that I felt like I was enjoying my time out there a lot more than a lot of the other people were, because I wasn't so enthralled with, well, am I shooting the scores that this guy is who is now playing professionally, and that sort of rat race that you get into.
Is that the same for you, Walker, would you say?
Very different, actually. And this is something that Henry and I have talked a lot about over the last 3 years. I knew probably by the beginning of my sophomore year at Wofford College that it was same as Henry. Like I wasn't on the trajectory that would have given me a really hard decision or an easy decision to play pro. But it wasn't something that fed me. And I struggled throughout my entire, playing career, but particularly the first year and my third and fourth years at school, just kind of battling my emotions on the golf course, not only externally, but what it did to me mentally. I put a little bit too much value into my scores on the golf course. And I think similar to Henry, I approached golf, competitive golf, college golf as a way to create the sort of environment that would make me better at whatever I was doing. That was what attracted me to college athletics. And it was great for doing that. I just think I was a little bit immature in the way that I went about getting better and expecting certain results of myself. Looking beside me rather than what's in front of me. And so by the time I left college golf, it was a break that I needed. Had I continued it, I think I would have known the outcome, and it wouldn't have been favorable. It certainly would not have resulted in a successful pro career. And, we got called off because I graduated in 2020. So we got called off in March. I was, gearing up for our end of year tournaments, and was just burdened by my own expectations, whatever else. We got called off of the season, and I was kind of forced to get away from the game for a little bit. And it started it took a while, but it started a whole nother sort of appreciation of the game, and has removed me from a lot of those things that I talked about earlier. It's fed into the podcast. I think I'm still figuring it out, frankly, but I just see the game in an entirely different light than I did when I was playing competitively. And it's been wonderful.
And that's quite a short break as well. Like, sorry to interrupt, but that's a short break of a couple of years. And there's like a real big change there in terms of your outlook on the game. I would say, I'm 36. I'd say 20 years ago, I was highly invested in my score. And there's been a slow, Tom's going to laugh here. I can see his face cracking on the pod. But there's like it's like there's no overnight change there. To do that in 2 or 3 years to radically change how you're looking at the game, it's quite big, I'd say.
It had it really, Sam, it had a lot to do with talking to different people, honestly. We started the podcast in 22, but we had a lot of conversations about this sort of thing as I was leaving school and starting to work. And so at the time, I was in my first job out of school was in Nebraska, and I was working with Rob and Tad King Collins Golf doing Landman, and we played a lot of recreational golf after work. Had I not been there, had I been doing, say, what I am now, it would have been entirely different. It was very much environment that allowed that sort of transition to take place.
We don't get many people on the podcast that go through the college system. I think the college system is somewhat a mystery to most of us. Can you try and, as difficult as this may seem, can you try and sum up what it's like to be in the college system, the level of golf, how difficult it is, how competitive it is? Because I imagine it's a world where, similar to the pro game, if you're not going lights out, you're kind of going backwards. But I honestly don't know a huge amount about it.
It's incredibly competitive. I mean, it is easily, I've thought about this over time, not that it was something that I was considering necessarily, but, you'd see some kids turn pro out of high school, and, it can be a decent path depending on your situation, but by and large in the States, like far and away, the best opportunity to really improve at the game and the way that things are going with PGA Tour U and all the rest, it's obviously going to become more one-to-one with just like the opportunities that you have. But in terms of competition, the courses that are played in the college system, the way that, you travel around the country and see different types of golf and kind of get used to what it's like to travel as a professional, and then just straight up the competition. Like if we want to just quantify it, if you look at guys that play at the top schools and get to play in all those top tournaments, like those are as highly ranked from a Wagger standpoint as any sort of, amateur championship, US amateur, Western amateur. The best college events are just as good as any of those. Yeah. So if you're, if you're playing in all of those top things, then like you are playing against the top players. I mean, I'll throw out a couple names here, and apologies for the name dropping, but in 2019, I played, I guess that would have been the final week for Victor Hovland, Matt Wolff, and Colin Morikawa, the last tournament they would have played in college.
That's the peak year, wasn't it? That was a big, big year.
Right. So I played with all three of those guys during that NCAA championship, and that's like very end of May, early June. Fast forward like 6 weeks, and you've got Morikawa and Matt Wolff like in a playoff for the PGA Tour tournament, And so I think that gives a sense of like how competitive it is. You look at the top guys, like for any bettors out there, if you want to just go look at the American college golf rankings and like start taking bets on PGA Tour events 18 months from now, you're going to do pretty well. The guys who are at the very top of it at this point, and this is why the PGA Tour U stuff has come out. Like if you just look at it kind of in the last 5-10 years, the tip top college players, not only are they probably going to be good professionals, like they're ready already, and that's a funny couple words to put together. But former teammate of mine, for example, Michael Thorbjornsen, I don't know if you guys saw that name this past week on the DP tour, but I mean, he's a junior. I've got to play a couple years with him, and
he's still amateur, isn't he? He went really close in Dubai, didn't he?
Yeah, he was tied for the lead after the second round. He tied for fourth last summer at the Travelers Championship on the PGA Tour. And again, this is a guy that's like just barely crossed the halfway mark. In fact, because he started like his freshman year was cut short with COVID, he's not even really halfway through college golf, and he's already out there
in
top
Series
5
events.
Exactly.
That's like crazy.
And he's ranked like fourth in the college golf system. There are guys that are ranked ahead of him. For example, people are going to get to see in a month or two here, Gordon Sargent play at the Masters. Like maybe I'll sound slightly crazy, but I'm pretty confident in saying this. Like Gordon Sargent is going to be very, very qualified to be in that field. Sure, he'll be nervous. He hasn't played in the Masters. He hasn't played a bunch of professional tournaments, but like, I'm not saying he's as good as the top 10 guys in the world, but he is not one of the bottom 5 players in that field. These top guys are unbelievably good. And that's just a credit to, how many great players there are in the college system. And it just becomes that much more competitive every single year.
As an example, what does a week look like for? I know this is going way off target. This is what we talked about earlier. We don't really stay on course with these podcasts. But what does a week look like for a college golfer? Is there a huge amount of education in there, or is it just like full-time coaching? How does that all look?
I will try to stay between the lines here and not let my competitive juices get the best of me. I went to a pretty high-level academic school, and so there was definitely a good bit of academics baked into that. There are certain programs, I will not name names at the moment.
Oh, come on.
There's certain programs that
we're in the UK.
All right,
Henry's on the other side of the mic
Screw it.
today.
I'll throw it out there. I'll throw it out there. So I already said Matt Wolf, and he went to Oklahoma State. Those are not my favorite guys. They don't do as much school as some of us do. I went to a place called Stanford University. Anyway, with that on the record, there is going to be a varying level of academics depending on what sort of a school that you go to. And then from there, I mean, the golf and the fitness regimen and all of those different things, it's intense. I mean, I summed it up at some point. It's probably pushing a good, NCAA might hop on me for saying this, because technically there's a rule that says you can only mandate 20 hours a week as a coach, that players have to be at practice and have to be playing in qualifying rounds and things like that. But that said, any sort of qualifying round, any 18-hole round you would play goes on the books as 3 hours. And so let's say you're driving an hour to get there, hour to get back, 5 hours to play. Realistically, it can be more like a 7-8 hour endeavor. So anyway, all of that sort of stuff aside, I think a pretty decent way to think about it, it's like a pretty solid 40 hours a week when you're in season, plus, the academics that you have, which for a final time varies depending on where you're at.
That's crazy. That's insane. I played over Christmas, actually. I played with a chap down at Deal who's just in his first year at an American college on the West Coast. And he was just saying, every morning, 6 a.m, they're out, they'll play 18 holes, they'll hit balls. When you say 20 hours, I'm thinking that sounds like it's a massive low ball. It's got to be more than 20 hours of training. But people want to get to the top, don't they? So it's fascinating. And in terms of the topical side of the tie, because I just want to hang on this a little bit. There's a few threads, I think, to tie together. No pun intended.
That was very good, Sam.
It was a great segue, wasn't it? That's the thing. When you do 171 episodes of this, you just start to really nail those little points.
And then you can slap yourself on the back while you're at it, which is quite good.
Exactly. Another great thing about it. It's my podcast. Anyway, look, the topics you guys cover on the tie, they kind of cross over, I think, a little bit with some of the stuff we do. There's architecture themes, there's history themes, there's cultural themes. What's the bit that really kind of grabs you in the game? How does it all come together? Because it's broad, but it's kind of niche and dialed and intense, right? It's like a fairly deep connection with the game, I sense you guys have.
Yeah. So Henry and I actually have different main interests within the game right now, I would say. We wanted to come up with 3 very clear metrics for how we define the pod. That is culture of the game, which is intentionally broad, competition, which I would say Henry takes the forefront on, and then architecture, which I take the forefront on. And those are our primary interests. We have interests outside of those those 3, and but primarily that's what we tackle. And the goal with keeping those 3, I mean, within those 3 sort of verticals, you can hit a lot of stuff relative to golf and outside of golf. But you can also do a really niche podcast with a very certain type of guest. And that's been really fun.
Yeah, it's great. And I suppose the sweet spot of the game is when those 3 things collide. I think you can have great architecture, but if the company or the environment around it's no good, it's like, okay, and you can have really great competitive golf, but it's like on what land, when you get all 3 of those. When I think about the magical days golf that I've played, invariably it's been competitive, it's good fun playing a match or something that's where you're in it. But how those 3 things kind of collide is quite cool. So just in terms of the process then of that whole sort of journey that you guys have been on with the podcast, you've been through a load of episodes now. Did you ever hit a point of sort of fatigue, or, is it hard to sort of maintain cadence and kind of keep the rhythm going? Is it, what kind of keeps you in there really with it all?
I'll give Henry a lot of credit on this. He's been, in this thing, we've talked online and offline about this concept. I really enjoyed, Sam, I really enjoyed your thoughts when we did a podcast prior to Christmas time, just about learning through the pod. It is an evolution, and it never really stays the same. The communication between you and your mates, the communication between Henry and myself, the consistency of it all, how you deliver stuff on a week by week basis. Like, I give a lot of credit to Henry on that stuff because he's really played the leading role in that sort of thing. But it really is a game of just kind of balancing what each person's good at, and consistency is really not fun most of the time. But I'm always proud of the fact that we put out content on a week to week basis, and as long as you get okay with realizing that it's not all going to be the best stuff you've ever put out, the act of putting it out is as important as the quality. I think that's really been the growth of late, you know.
I think that's one of the things that we struggled with is, I mean, you don't want to admit it, but they're not all as good as each other. And sometimes you're like, certainly if you fall out the swing of it and you feel like, well, we put one back together, and you're like, it doesn't feel like that we're doing as good a job as we can do, but we've got to get out there because we've got to start the wheel spinning again. It's interesting what you said about earlier on about the dirt, because within our podcast, we've got a couple of strands that we can pull on, the course diaries being one, which is where we talk about visiting places. Sometimes we do it with significant people from the courses, sometimes we do it with ourselves, and the Eclectic 18 being another that you can just kind of lean on. And that structure where you've got the dirt and we've got, say, Eclectic 18 just provides a structure around that you can just kind of let it all, it becomes so much easier just to fit it within that structure rather than trying to think of 1,000 questions to ask people. Do you find it difficult to, try and get you guests on your podcast, or think about who you want on, who your audience be engaged with, then trying to reach out to those people? How does that process work with you guys?
Yeah, I think that there's definitely a challenge to that. We do that a bit separately, I will say. Like, Walker will kind of have his list of people that he's interested in. A lot of the time that does, as he talked about, sort of our 3 tenets of culture, architecture, and competition. A lot of the people he's speaking with are going to be more in that architecture field. So it's going to be some superintendents, certainly some architects, different people as well. People, there's a journalist on recently, a lot of different options there. But by and large, it's better to think about Walker kind of going towards those sorts of people. And then for me, I certainly enjoy talking to, a few professional golfers and just general competitive golfers here and there. But then I've also found a lot of interest in like talking to people like yourselves, other people that have podcasts and they're just generally interested in, the sorts of things that we are interested in. But it's a constant challenge, and we talk about this a lot. I'd be curious to hear your guys' thoughts on this of like, how many people do we want to pick on who are more of what we would refer to as like a retention pod? Like, okay, we know that based on what people like within our podcast, like this is the kind of person they want to hear from, versus, okay, well, here's someone that I'm either really interested in, or, this person has like a very strong reach and it might allow us to kind of introduce ourselves to a new audience. Thinking about all of those different things can be a bit complex, because say you pull someone in and, the podcast gets a lot of listens, you get some good feedback on it, and that it's a little bit out there in terms of your current audience, but, kind of that iteration of like, how much do we satisfy who's already listening versus, trying to continue to grow? There's some challenge there.
It's a great comment.
I don't think there's a good answer.
Oh yeah, I think that way that works for us is, it's almost like if you read the title and you don't know who the person is that's in the title. So I'll give you an example. A friend of ours, journalist Dan Davis, has been on the podcast
twice.
Well, last year at some point. He built a golf course in his back garden. Most people will read that title and say, Cookie Jar Golf with Dan Davis. If you haven't heard about it, it's pretty much going to be a good podcast. If you have heard them, if it's Cookie Jar Golf with Eric Van Rooyen, for instance, or something like that, you know what you're getting. You know what's going to come up. It's going to be good listens. You're going to get a good number of listeners because people want to hear from professional golf or whatever. But arguably, if you don't know who we're interviewing, probably a better podcast. It would be a rule of thumb.
Yeah, it's a really good shout, that, Henry. The weird thing is we've got to talk about your travel itinerary, but at the moment, the group therapy is too much fun. And hopefully it's insightful for the listeners. But you nailed it there. Like, maybe we never really think about it that consciously. I think, the process of iteration with the podcast is like so good in and of itself that maybe you naturally do it. We were doing it in 2020, and I remember everyone was in lockdown. So we were just kind of frantically speaking to people that we found interesting in the game. And then through process of that, you were bringing in different people on different topics. And I think Mike Clayton was an early one for us where it was like, oh, this stuff really resonates. Like, I'm finding it interesting, but it's clearly, you can tell by the numbers, it's like, this is really resonating. It's an interesting point. How much do you service? The podcasts are weird because they are almost echo chambers really in and of themselves, right? People talk about stuff that resonates and you can keep wearing that out, as long as you want until, and it'll keep going. But then sometimes you almost want to surprise people with stuff. Like we've had some thoughts about some podcasts we want to do this year, stuff that will surprise people when they open up, their iPhone on a Monday morning and they'll be like, whoa, was not expecting to see that. And that's quite interesting. Yeah. We certainly never do anything thinking consciously necessarily about the listener numbers, but it is always interesting to think about, maybe accessing different people that might not have heard of it, but ultimately trying to provide something, that's different. Like it's interesting to get a fresh take. I think sometimes we can get caught into this, particularly with architecture. I think it's really easy for that to become a bit, I don't know, self-indulgence, not the right term, but you get what I'm saying. It's very easy for us to all sit here and say the hole should be wide and there should be angles and, we should have loads more short grass. And it's like, yeah, great. That's like definitely on trend right now. But like there's space for another school of thinking in there and there's space for a bit more friction and some alternative views, I think. So, and I think if you kind of extrapolate that out across the wider game, it's kind of cool to get into some different people.
Sam, I got a follow-up comment and then a question back to you guys. The thing about architecture, I talked about this with DJ Pyhowski at No Laying Up. He was saying that early on, when they started doing a lot of stuff on golf courses, they found themselves being so repetitive about width and angles and certain architects and things that you see that look cool but are hard to describe and without doing it like redundantly. And I've always said this about good golf course architecture is that you could put anybody in these sorts of positions on certain golf courses at certain times of the day. They don't have to be a golfer. They don't need to know how to get the ball airborne, but everybody would appreciate the beauty or the significance of that place, some more than others. But how do you convey that feeling without actually putting somebody there? It's a really hard thing to do. And
it's a lot easier with a drone.
It's a lot easier with the drone, which you guys are crushing us on. And I'm loving the content. But I guess the follow-up question that I had was, how do you guys get out of the box? Do you have to do that systematically? Do you have, exercises to get out of your own thinking and come up with ideas that are outside of the current?
Yeah, there's loads of ways this could go. And by the way, this is a great segue, Walker, into your travel itinerary because we're kind of getting into that zone, I think. What do you think, Tom? What are yours?
Filler, Tom. Now, I think the way that we're by no means any experts in architecture. We've now listened to a lot of architects and we've now talked a lot about golf course architecture over the last three and a bit years, and it's kind of like you say, it's difficult to convey something to someone who hasn't been there. But I don't think we ever try and go down the route of coloring in a golf course. What we try and do typically when we're talking about places that we've been is talked about it from an architecture standpoint in terms of broad strokes, but mainly focus on history of these places. Now we're blessed if you go to any course down the road, unless it's like a post-war course, you're looking at something that's between 90 and 120 years old, maybe up to 150 years old. So these places have got an abundance of history that we can lean on, and that architecture invariably changes over the history of those golf courses. So that's kind of the way that we like to approach it. I think if we stood there and kind of preached about the James Braid and his revisionist architecture or old Tom and how when he set out golf courses, there's basically not a single golf course left that is old Tom and someone's gone in and changed it. I think that we would quickly become quite repetitive.
I think the excitement comes through. So I think, maybe you guys are probably really similar in this regard, but I think ultimately it's sentiment. Like everybody who plays this game has an appreciation for golf course architecture. They might say they're not into golf architecture, or they might not read a book. They might not sort of know who Tom Doak is, but I guarantee you everybody who plays this sport can tell you a golf course they enjoy and a golf course they didn't enjoy. Like that's 100% fact, right? Now they might not put the same stock in the nuance of the bunker style, the consistency of transitions between the greens. They might put more stock in the views and what the course looks like, or how quick the surfaces play. But fundamentally, they all have a way of appreciating golf courses. So I think we try and maybe color in as much as things that we actually like. So I really like sort of things that would be maybe sort of more half par, shorter courses. Yeah, I like short par fours. So when you get really animated about a golf course, it's because, there's a load of and it's like, Sam really likes this place. Like it's really clear that Sam loves Ely. It's clear that Bruce and Tom also really like it, but it's really clear that Sam's going totally over the top now about Ely. So that's kind of how you do it, maybe through a sentiment. I've got no idea. But yeah, I think the great thing is, and you guys will be the same, and this is the segue into the trip and what we did for you guys, and you guys looking at a travel itinerary for us, is that we all have different tastes and what we appreciate in the game. I think, like, I'm guessing, I'm seeing you guys nodding. We have different things that we like, and therefore, being subjective is probably the biggest strength in this. Trying to be objective, I think, is probably where you kind of get stuck somehow.
Yeah, I was going to use that to ride right into our itinerary here, and I'll provide sort of some high level thoughts about how we went about this, and then I'm going to kind of toss it over to Walker to really run through some of the courses and how we decided to piece the whole thing together.
Just before we do, should we jump into what's happened? So you guys have already talked for an hour, and you're pretty much best friends. I'm on the outside of this, so let's talk about the task you set. You guys at the tie set Sam, and then the retort.
Yeah. So Tom, what happened was we'd been messaging a bit for a while, and we're like, let's do a podcast together. And I was like, yeah, cool. Well, I'd love to come on and chat to you about golf in Britain, and I'm fascinated about golf in the States. And invariably, we don't always get as many opportunities to play golf either side of the transatlantic as we want. And Henry and Walker were like, Sam, put together a budget golf itinerary. I'm going to give you $1,500 for 5 days, up to 7 rounds of golf. And I was like messaging them like crazy before. I was like, guys, I cannot spend $1,500 in the UK. It's literally impossible. All I'm going to be doing is reeling off England's best 7 course here. Like, it's just crazy. So I think I came down to $1,000 for 7 courses. And then I built you guys some crazy itinerary, which was like £150, I think, for 5 courses, something ludicrous. And we left it there. And then it was like, I'm really keen to understand where a visiting golfer in the US would go on a bit of a budget. Like, I know that access is definitely one issue. And if you go to resort places, it's also very, very expensive over there because there's a standard and an expectation of the game, I think, in America. Therefore, it's an expensive game in the US. I think it's kind of, certainly that's my belief anyway. What would a budget trip look like? What that budget was, there's been some negotiations. Is it fair to say, Henry?
There have been a few. Yeah, we did 5 courses, 5 days. We only are covering greens fees here. So if you start to get into travel and some of the different expenses, like the $1,500 is literally going to bust in about, 1 day. And if you ever stop by a pro shop, you're just completely gone. But under $1,000, we were able to piece together 5 courses within the Carolinas. So we're both from Charlotte, North Carolina. There's North and South Carolina. And we started with kicking around some ideas of, okay, should we start up in Virginia and kind of make our way down, maybe get into Georgia? As everybody knows, just the state of North Carolina, I reckon, is probably pretty similar size to the whole of England. And so we decided to just keep it a little bit smaller, keep our scope between just the Carolinas. And, to do this, the idea was we wanted to kind of give a taste of the Carolinas. So some really great American architects who have had like a really solid piece of the Carolinas. And so we wanted to give some different concepts there. And then also touch some different parts of the state. So there's some mountainous golf, which we stayed a bit away from. There's a lot of sandy golf. There is more just sort of parkland, as you may think of it. And then there's the beach. There's a lot of coastal golf as well. So we made a nice little loop to where we're going to hit on each of those different things. We also included, we included one resort course, which we'll get to all of that. We recorded a bit of public golf. And then we also have some private courses, but ones that are going to be a little bit more accessible, because if we're being honest, to keep it under $1,000, we did have to bank on the, okay, well, we can go to this pretty good course. And if you pay the accompanied fee, then you're able to keep it a little bit lower. As you alluded to, the problem with America, one of the biggest issues, accessibility is there when you get to the very top courses, but then, start to think about, okay, so the Ocean course, Pinehurst number 2, Harbor Town, some of these big names that may come to you that you see on the PGA Tour, all public. And those are all going to run you, like, if we're being realistic, it's $500-600 and probably a caddy as well. And it's going to take you 5 hours. You have to play with 3 people who are not going to break that green fee just hardly.
I heard Pinehurst 2 is so slow. I had a friend who just came back from there and he said 6 hours to play Pinehurst 2. I got the sense it was possibly the least enjoyable course of their trip in the Carolinas. So I'm psyched about this. I've been to South Carolina once. Can I just add just a point on the culture? Can someone put some color around that? I thought the culture and just the people around the Carolinas was unbelievable. It just has such a nice, chilled way. Everyone looks like they're walking in slow motion.
Southern hospitality. That's what you hear. Fair take.
Drive and talk in slow motion too. It's depends on where you are. But South Carolina, North Carolina, the more I travel, some of the most underrated states in the country. Before we jump in,
because we don't get to speak to many people that have played a whole bunch of American courses and can fill us in on this. I know this is very difficult to compute, but what's kind of the percentage private to public courses out there? Is it majoritively private? That's the kind of what I'm led to believe about America, but is that real? Is there a ton of public golf as well?
Yeah, I want to provide context here because it varies significantly. I've talked to friends about this from other parts of the country, depending on where you are. So for a bit of context, I grew up in the Carolinas and then went to school in California, which is total other side of the country. I now live in Texas, so I've been around a bit. Walker's traveled plenty, but has stayed more in the Southeast, and it depends drastically on where you are. So take, for example, where we're from, Charlotte, North Carolina. By and large, it's private, and you have tiers to that. So you're going to have a couple like higher end, pretty difficult to get into, nice private courses. You'll then maybe have 5 or 6 or 7 courses in the city that are, pretty good courses, good architecture, nothing crazy, a little bit cheaper. And then you'll probably have another whole tier that is still private, but really not very good. It's no better than just your general public golf course. In fact, a lot of public courses may be better. And then in this particular part of the country, if you're talking public golf, it's really bad, like hardly maintained. It's pretty sad, really, because there's just no good public golf to be played. And frankly, where I live now in Texas, it's fairly similar. Where Walker is in Florida, also going to be fairly similar. There's a huge difference. So there should be the term public and then resort. So like Pinehurst, Kiowa Island, that's resort golf. Yes, it's public, but like
golf,
that's 500 feet, got to stay, all of those different things. That's a completely different thing. And so then what I wanted to provide context on is, so take, for example, like Los Angeles. Los Angeles, you have 6, 7, 8, 10, like top tier, great private golf courses, the Los Angeles Country Club, Bel Air, Wilshire Country Club, Riviera. Very, very difficult to get into, uber exclusive, great golf courses. But then what I think is great actually about places like California, New York even has a little bit of this at times in certain different parts of the country, is that from there, if you're not in one of those tip top places, everything else for the most part is public. And so you still get a lot of really good golf at varying levels. You might have your $150 or $200 public round, but then you also have, your $80 round, you've got your $30 round. but they're
Okay.
very clear tiers to the public golf. Whereas I think that a lot of parts of the country, it's just like a bunch of tiers to private. And if you're not a member of a private course, like there's hardly any even half decent golf to be played.
I'm going to add just a brief bit of context, and it's obvious, but it's important to note the obvious here in that the majority, I'm not saying all of it, but the majority of the land in the UK is God's gift to golf. I mean, this land there could be a number of things done to it, but golf is on the short list. You know, if you've got a piece of land that was zoned a certain way and just kind of makes sense for it to be a golf course, it's been taken over by the city. The city's had it for a long time. It's, it has clay and a ton of roots, drainage issues. Just by nature of like a P&L, it's going to be way more difficult to get a public style, business off the ground. And this is something that I see a lot of primarily on the East Coast. I see a lot of it in Florida, where if you have the proper, financing behind a club, you exclude a certain group of people, but you're able to manufacture something that works because of the money behind it. It's not that the goal was to be exclusive. It's that people were focused on creating a good product, and you were given X and you have to put something into it to get Y, which is why you get the private exclusive. There just aren't that many examples of wonderful land that have been allocated towards public type business models. And this is, I think, primarily why I see it. It's not anybody's fault necessarily. But it's got to be the model that changes when the land isn't as good, and that's my belief.
I mean, I think I've actually never thought about it in that fashion. And when you put it like that, like, there's some courses up in Scotland that there are, around East Lothian, Fife, a little bit further north, Aberdeen, that sort of way, that the land is so good. The sandy land is just so good that they can get by with 2 greenkeepers, someone manning the bar, and a GM, and that's it. Maybe not even the GM. Sometimes one guy does it all. But you can kind of get away with it because the fescue grows and you can cut it quite long and it still runs fine. It's hard.
Doesn't
it's firm.
need that. Yeah.
And you can just get away with such low maintenance because the land is so good that you can kind of. I mean, very, very interesting. Let's not digress any further. We've got an itinerary.
I can't wait to hear this. I've not seen it. I'd send it through. I'm actually pumped to see these 5 courses.
Are you gonna tell us where we're gonna fly into as well?
Yeah, we sure are.
Oh, we're dialed, Tom. We got this all squared away.
Good.
Walker, this is on you. Have at it.
Let's go, baby. The people are going to be flying into CLT, Charlotte, North Carolina, and we will begin the trip from that point. Okay. Our first stop of this trip is going to be a tiny little place called Camden Country Club. Camden is an old horse town. It's got a lot of soul. Talking about culture, it's a place where you're not going to find a lot unless you're really looking for it. And unfortunately, on a trip like this, it's a place that grows fonder in your memory as you play it 2, 3, 4, 5 times. But Camden is one of the very, very few, I would put it inside maybe the top 15, 20 courses in the U.S. that are just flat out underappreciated in terms of its history. Now, Henry and I both grew up playing Carolinas Golf Association events, lots of really great competition as a junior golfer with, state guys who are really figuring out how to play good golf, and got to play this tournament called the Creed Invitational, named after a guy named Jimmy Creed, who's influential in the club. This golf course, it was a Donald Ross original in 1916, of which Walter Travis came in and did some work in 1923. And Chris Spence has followed up in 2011 to kind of clean it up and restore it to some of Ross's, original contouring, particularly around the greens. But, guys, you guys would get it walking off the first green. It's very unsuspecting. It's quite flat. There's some movement in different corners of the golf course, but really it's just some very simple dirt moving around the contours of the green that make it absolutely brutal. Classic Donald Ross, can't go long on a lot of these greens. Really fast and slippery Bermuda. You have to pay attention to the grain. There is some unfairness in play. You can put yourself in positions where you just say, man, I don't know what the hell to do with this one. I mean, it's a golf course that makes you kind of hang yourself with your own decision making 2, 3, sometimes 4 shots after you've made what you didn't know was an error. And it's one of my favorite places to play. You can play Camden. It is private. You can play it as a guest for just over $50. So
see,
it's
that's amazing. I just, most
great.
people wouldn't even know that you can, clubs that are private in America, there's, like you said at the start, I think really, Henry, is like, there's different tiers of private. It's like, yes, there is the British model out there. It's maybe how we perceive American healthcare. It's like, there's a genuine belief in Britain that we have the NHS. And if I get run over on the roads in the US, they will leave me out on the street unless I have a credit card or insurance. And it's like, no, there are varying degrees of it. That's fascinating. Yeah. So that's a Donald Ross original. Isn't it strange that history is pretty much written by the victors, and what I mean by that is not far away, you've got Pinehurst. And I'm not saying Pinehurst isn't the jewel in the crown for Ross or anything like that, but you've got to think in those days when those courses were set up, stylistically and stuff, they would have all not looked the same, but they would have had the same care, love, and attention that Ross would have put in. He wouldn't have put in huge amounts more effort at Pinehurst than he would at Camden, but it's just almost circumstance, for whatever reason, means that maybe that's not as loved, and it's great to hear that those places are benefiting from these restorations because they're breathing life into it. Just a thought, really, more than anything. It's like, yeah.
I'd like to add that I think that was infinitely more detailed than anything Sam gave you. Sam,
did you listen to that podcast? Did you?
Of course, I listened to it.
Impressive. It was like 2 hours. That's good work.
Yeah, it was.
But that's the thing. I'm not economical with my words. I think we've met twice now, Henry. You know that. But yeah, I'm not economical with the words. That was eloquent and beautiful.
Yeah, thank you, sir. That. One thing I'll add there, and this is going to play right into the second course as well, which once again I'll let Walker take off on. But Sam, you mentioned how there don't seem to be a lot of courses in the States that exist where you can kind of follow a little bit more of the British model, and they're willing to let you come in and play as a guest. It's funny how, so yes, if you look at some of the top ones, I'm not going to throw out names here by any means, but if you were to write a letter, call the pro shop at insert tip top golf course, by and large, you're going to someone's going to pick up the phone and be like, WTF are you doing calling me asking if you can get on this golf course? That's just how it is. But there are courses like this where at Camden, if you called them up and said, hey, I'm coming over, I'm from England, I've heard this is an awesome golf course, heard a lot about Donald Ross, a lot of cool golf courses in the Carolinas, and I've heard great things about Camden. I'd love to get the opportunity to come out and play. 100% would have you. And this next one we'll get to is the same way. And this is a little nugget for anyone that makes it to the central part of the country from the UK. This is probably far-fetched, but I'm sure people have heard of Sandhills Golf Club, probably the best Core and Crenshaw out there. Notorious for the proper, with a nice note sent to the club, they will let you on if you tell them for your appreciation for Core and Crenshaw golf. And if you make your way out there, they are known to let people get on. So just a thought for anyone that ever finds themselves out in central Nebraska.
I think that goes for most. I don't want to bracket this as certainly in the UK. I think you can do this. I obviously don't have any experience in the US, but I think a nice letter goes a long way. And much better than picking up the phone and being like, oh, here we go, I want to come set your course record. But I think just a nice letter, it does tend to go a lot further than I think than a phone call if you're going to do something like that.
We're probably off to life advice at this point. I think that extrapolates to anything. Get out your pen and a nice bit of paper, and people will appreciate that a little bit more.
Okay, gentlemen, that's a beautiful start. $50, Camden. What a shout,
Henry. I was going to introduce our next one, but I'd like if you would dig into our second one of the day.
Yeah, I can certainly do that. So Second course on the list, and this is one that we have a lot of passion about, and really, not that Camden isn't great as well, but this is like a big kind of double underline recommendation for anyone that makes it over to the Carolinas. Palmetto Golf Club in Aiken, South Carolina. It's going to be about a 2-hour drive from Camden. And I will throw out that, yes, we're both from Charlotte. And so maybe people are thinking that's the only reason we said CLT. It's actually, you can get a direct flight from Heathrow over to Charlotte. It's a very large airport. And so good opportunity. There we go.
Insert Sam Williams hyperbole.
Sam's wrapping the head cover right now.
Got the Palmetto head cover, 1892. So originally laid out by Thomas Hitchcock. If we're being honest here, don't know a ton about Thomas Hitchcock. I believe he is very important to just the general area of Aiken. The woods that surround, or the forest that surrounds the entire golf club, referred to as the Hitchcock Woods. Once again, we're still in horse country. So there's actually, if you go on like a Sunday to Palmetto and you drive around the surrounding area, you'll see some polo being played. So it really is kind of this time capsule of a part of South Carolina where there's some really neat stuff that goes on, really fantastic sandy terrain. And that's why you're finding some of these hidden gems there. Very rolling piece of property. I think it's underrated in that regard. And, you know, the real magic here is that McKinsey did a lot of work at Palmetto. It's about 25 minutes down the road from Augusta. So the story actually goes that the grounds of Augusta, the whole concept was laid out in the clubhouse at Palmetto, because it predates it by, what are we working on, 42 years here? I think Augusta's like 1934 or something like that. So earlier than Augusta, but a lot of work done by McKinsey. And you'll see it right away with the bunkering. You walk past the clubhouse, you get out there, the putting green actually kind of shares almost with the 18th green, certainly with the bunkering. And you'll see it right away with those bunkers on the 18th hole. It's about shout out short par fours. It's about a 300-yard par four. And the bunkering just screams McKenzie right away. Tom Doak did some work in about 05, and then Gil Hance is the architect in residence at this point. He did some work in 07. And, frankly, what you hear around Palmetto is that they keep asking Hance to come back and work on this and that. And Hance kind of says, like, it's pretty darn good as it is. And what makes it so great is there are a ton of par fours, and the green complexes are just super, super interesting. You have a ton of different things going on. It actually starts out with 6 straight par fours, which is very unique. Has a couple great par threes. The 7th hole, if anyone's ever seen a picture of it, we can probably lay that into the episode here. One of the cooler par threes out there. It really mirrors the 7th at Cypress as well. And so really neat course to kind of paint some context for people that haven't maybe gotten the opportunity to play McKinsey stuff before. You've probably heard of Cypress Point. Sure, everyone has seen Augusta, but it's not easy to get to play those courses. If you really kind of use your imagination, and frankly, you don't have to all that much, you can really, really see some of that stuff at Palmetto. Along the lines of what Walker said with Camden as well, I've gotten to play Palmetto quite a bit and as well in a tournament called the Palmetto Amateur. They dial this thing up. And I mean, if you break par, you've done very, very well. The number of 4 and 5 putts you'll see on these greens is a bit outrageous. So this is going to be one of our strongest recommendations overall. And once again, same deal as Camden. If you were to call them up and say, hey, I'm coming over, heard a lot about the course, supposed to be great, they'll absolutely let you on. Probably going to run you $50 or $100. It's not very expensive. And just a really, really neat place to get to play golf.
The two things that are really great about Palmetto are the first is that you have just this ginormous range in the elevation of the property and also in what the golf holes are like. People talk all the time about Pine Valley and how there's no bad hole in the golf course. I'll run you just through the front 9 at Palmetto. You have very short par 4, very awkward, weird par 4, very long par 4, very tricky second shot par 4. One of the wildest greens in the world on 5, the most half par hole I've ever seen in my life in 6. You have just this absolute target. It's like playing darts on number 7. Right of the green is screwed. Left of the green is worse because you're going to go right of the green and then you're just screwed for your third. 8 is this unassuming golf hole where the first time you play it, you're like, yeah, this is that one dud of the golf course. And then the more you play 8, you realize how great of a golf hole it is. And then 9, like the rest of the golf holes, has so much character to it that what seems like a fairly simple golf hole, given the undulation of the hole, turns out to be the best golf hole that you could have ever placed on that strip of land. And by the time you finish 18 at Palmetto, you're probably going to be frustrated. You're going to feel like you left a lot out there. You will have had a great time, got a kick-ass walk-in. I mean, it's coming down. I mean, it really is in Augusta in the sense of like, by the time you're kind of, heading up 14, ready to go back to the clubhouse, I mean, you've gotten a workout in already, and you've got some really good decisions to make and some shots to execute down the stretch. So pound for pound, Palmetto is just one of the greatest values you can find. It's really good stuff.
I got absolutely thumped by these boys for including the 18th hole at Palmetto in my eclectic 18, which basically means that's the best 18th hole I've ever played. And we've got a bloody good one at our home club, I will add. But Palmetto's a strong contender for loads of holes in that exercise. It's so good. It's so good. Like it's, I think building on anything you said there, because you've covered it all so perfectly. I don't want to say anything about the course beyond what you've said. It wouldn't add anything. Like that was brilliant. But there's an ineffable quality in the air, isn't there? With the rocking chairs on the veranda, the sea breezes in the clubhouse, Brooks in the pro shop. It's magical. Absolutely magical.
Sam, one thing I'll throw in there, that's all, like, those are great takeaways, having only been there once. And probably should have said this from jump, but so Walker and I have this concept, and this is actually a mini series that we've done with our podcast as well. We refer to it as house theory, which I think more commonly you would hear, placemaking, or just the general sense of place. Like, how good is a place within what is presented to you there? How apropos to the conditions and just the entire area is it? And that's kind of the idea of what we wanted to capture with some of these courses, is places that truly have that great sense of place. And just as you put it there, like when you walk into Palmetto, Brooks in the pro shop, the old school clubhouse, the rocking chairs, you'll have, some people that are super into architecture like ourselves that are going to be out there seeing this sort of gem. And then, a lot of the other people that play are just kind of, good old South Carolina boys from Aiken, South Carolina. And they may or may not even realize how good they have it. But, the sense of place of Palmetto is really, really high. And again, just something we probably should have said from jump. That's a bit of what we wanted to capture with some of these different golf courses.
Yeah, no, for sure. And there's one add to you talk about Augusta there being nearby, and I might have this wrong, but like my understanding, I've been there once. We spent 3 days there back in 2018, I think 2018, and obviously they're 1892. They're one of the pretty much in that founding sort of core group of the USGA sort of golf courses around sort of the time of Chicago and some of those. I think they've got a letter in the pro shop. There's a room at the back of the pro shop round to the left, which is like a sort of bit of an archive room. And they've got a letter from Augusta National, and it's sort of mid-30s saying, look, we'd really appreciate it if you can sort of send some people up to our golf club at some point, when they come and visit the mighty Palmetto, because, Augusta National would like to be considered by these people as a worthy stop off as well. And it's just incredible, isn't it? You sort of see that letter and the history, and there's obviously this great sort of, not quite relationship necessarily between the club, but there's obviously, a huge amount of reverence for Palmetto as a place, I think, in South Carolina, which is just incredible.
Yeah, very well put.
I'm just going to throw in there that I don't like Palmetto because I was supposed to be going in 2019, and I was done for work commitments and I couldn't go. And then I'd booked to go in 2020, and then COVID hit. So it's kind of my bogey course. Like I've been booked in to go there twice, and it's been kiboshed twice. So it's one of those ones that stings when people talk about it. It really stings.
It's so good, though. It's so magical. We're an hour in and we've got to 2 courses. I knew this was going to happen, but there's so much good stuff to unearth. But I cannot tell you how good I thought Palmetto is and how worthy it is of being on that list. I'm delighted you guys included it.
Sam, we booked out all day, and this was just the best. Course number 3. How many Pete Dye courses have you guys played? I'm curious.
Not one. Not a single one.
0.
Not
all right, so this is great.
I'd love to. I actually am quite interested in this. This is cool.
This is a little financial engineering here around the cost as well. We're going to go ahead and throw that out
I'm
there.
amazed we're not at Aitken next.
we thought about Aiken. We were getting heavy on the cork. There's some more cork to come. Aiken, let's go ahead and throw it in there. It was kind of on the backup list. And so, if you get out to Palmetto earlier in the day and you wrap up by noon, you decide to slide over and find some barbecue in Aiken or wherever, it's going to run you $30 to go play Aiken Golf Club in the afternoon. So that would still keep you under the $1,000. And that's a good shout, Sam, that if people have extra time in their day, this could be a good opportunity to go see Aiken.
If we're Dye and Quirk, are we at Harbour Town?
It's a good question. We're not.
Oh,
we're not.
Where are we? This is amazing.
I felt that Dye was important. And to be frank with you, I'm not, from a competition standpoint and a recreation standpoint, I'm not Pete Dye's biggest fan, just in terms of the product. But I think we all realize the benefit that the Dye family has had on the great golf courses that we love, particularly in the U.S., has sparked just this movement back towards golden age golf course architecture with a modern twist, new equipment, new agronomy, all the rest. But I think it's important to respect what Pete and Alice Dye did, the golf they made, particularly along the entire East Coast. I mean, you've got Crooked Stick, you've got Sedgefield, you've got Colleton River Plantation, which is the course that we're going to be diving into today. We've got TPC Sawgrass. I mean, there are a bunch of others that I'm not listing, including Harbour Town. But Dye did some really, really interesting stuff. And looking at it through a tournament player's lens, the way that he disguised different features, particularly towards the green with mounds and bunkering and making bunkers further away intentionally smaller, or bunkers closer to you intentionally larger to throw off your perception. It's genius stuff. It's just not my palate, But Colleton River Plantation is in Bluffton, South Carolina. It's going to be a little bit, I guess, south of Charleston. Is that right, Henry?
It's a great question. Let's go with south. I believe it is. It is south.
No one will check. We're okay.
It is because it's
45
in between
to an hour.
It's in between Charleston and Savannah, so it's about an hour
so
south
45
of Charleston.
to an hour. Yeah, that's not bad.
I was losing the plot there with my geography, but I think that's right. I think it's like an hour south of Charleston, and it's the kind of deal to where if you took a boat north, you'd probably get to Charleston in 20 minutes, but it's like an hour 10 drive. It's brutal around there. But Colleton River Plantation is private. I mean, we've gone with 3 privates in a row. Y'all should be beating us over the head, but
once again, accessible private.
Right, exactly. So the guys, it seems a bit grudgy. Like it seems like it would be a stuffy club, but everybody there is just fantastic. Like I've never met, a pro or an assistant pro or anybody on the maintenance staff or any of the staff out there that are like less than wonderful. I mean, they're just great people. But the golf course itself is challenging. Kind of tells a story, and it's got some quirks to it. Like I know you guys have some short flag sticks over there in the UK.
Yeah. They work. They definitely work for visual deception.
Yes, for sure. And it fits in with the theme at Colleton River quite a bit. It's classic Dye in the sense where you've got a portion of the golf course that goes back into the trees. You've got a portion of the golf course that definitely utilizes, what primarily the East Coast and the Southeast U.S. does so well, which is water hazards. And then towards the latter half of the golf course, really the last 6 or 7 holes, you're on the water, and your primary task is to control your ball in the wind. So you really do get 3 flavors, and the variety.
Kiowa?
And
so the shades of Kiowa Island, or not really?
Quite a lot like Kiowa, not as coastal. So this is like marshland. I don't know if you've ever really seen that, but kind of like backwaters, not right out on the sand and beach. But a lot of the same stuff. You're within 4 miles of being at the actual beach.
I've just Googled it. One thing, it's absolutely stunning. Like it's a beautiful, beautiful looking place. 2 things that amused me immediately. The first hole is called Handshake. which I think is
It's
absolutely
a handshake
brilliant.
opener. It's
Just called
literally a handshake
handshake.
opener.
And course of die is called the best I have ever built. Bold.
I was going to throw that out there. Yeah, there's the plaque on the first tee that Pete Dye says this is the greatest golf course I've built, or something like that. Yeah, a bit of color that I'll provide around it. It is one of those places for sure that you get there and you feel like you're in kind of a golfer's oasis. You know, it is a golf club among an area. And I do really like the Hilton Head area and just the entire low country of South Carolina. But there are a lot of clubs baked into there that are a little bit more of, they're kind of this private escape where golf is, the courses are good, but it's more kind of Tom Fazio, Robert Trent Jones stuff. It's meant to be just a vacation of sorts or a holiday sort of place where the golf courses are just nothing special. This is more of a true golf club where you can tell, as Walker started to put it with the pros and everyone, that people really care about the golf itself. People aren't out there to just have a hit and giggle and have a million drinks and just play for nothing. It's a little bit more of a golfer's course, which is I think is one of the super cool things about it. And you know, the other reason I from jump I mentioned that little bit of financial engineering here, that they are going to be open to letting some people on. And you know, in a part of the country where you've got a lot of good Pete Dye stuff, but your cheapest Pete Dye option up and down the East Coast, if you think about the big names of TPC Sawgrass, Harbor Town, the Ocean Course, and by the way, I love all of those courses. They all are, particularly the Ocean Course and Sawgrass. I'll really highlight the Ocean Course. Fantastic. If you're a 20 handicapper, maybe try to play somewhere else. But if you're pretty good and you want to pay for it, really great courses. But it's going to be like $600. If you can get the accompanied rate at Colleton River, it's going to keep you down around 100, which is part of the reason why we decided to include it.
Wow. I've got a question which might take us off on a tiny bit. Well, I don't know whether to ask this question before or after we're finished with Colleton.
You sound nervous about asking the question. So while you're doing that,
it's just, I don't want to take us too far off topic, but I'm looking at it. I mean, it is absolutely stunning. The third hole is called Redan.
It's not
big
really
sort
Redan.
of template stuff in America. What was that? Sorry.
If you were going to ask, is it really a Redan? The answer
skip it.
It's a bit of a Redan. It's shades of a Redan, but you're not getting the real kicker. But
it's a par 3, but apart from that, it's broadly.
My question is kind of, it's weird because I think that CB Macdonald, all the template hole stuff has come originally from the UK, and a lot of them are based on UK golf holes, but it's just not a thing here. Like you would never say, oh, this course has a Redan or a Biarritz or whatever. I don't know where I'm going with it, but like, is it a big thing in America if you have like something that looks like a template hole on a golf course?
Yeah. So it's part of the golf education, I think. I see it dripped in a lot of different places, and I'll call out Threes Golf here, which I think we'll be hearing a lot more of in the next few months. Threes Golf was a concept started in Greenville by a guy named Davis Cessna, and they're going to be doing quite a few of them around the U.S. to try and kick up the public golf. Kind of think Top Golf, except real golf. Getting out there and playing real holes that might one day include 4s and 5s, but for now it's just 3s. And there's a lot of sort of template-like action in there, and I think it gets people talking. It's, I do think it's important to be wary of like the oversimplification or the over manipulation of template holes, because they were built, the original templates, as I understand it, and I haven't been over to the UK, but they were built into features. They were a solution to move water without destroying a feature that existed in nature. Whereas in the US, we largely don't have a template to begin with, so we interpret something, over manufacture it, and now you have laser leveled grades with a trough running through, which would be a Biarritz.
Yeah.
Is it really a Biarritz? Decide for yourself, but I think there's a little bit too much. People are just playing with the dough a little bit too much,
But your clubs that are iconic that leverage those. So I've not been there, but I'm thinking National Golf Links of America, which is largely based on template holes. C.B. McDonald pioneered that. He was, I don't know whether this is a bit of a reach, but he's kind of like old Tom in America for a golf, right? I mean, he was, founding member, first amateur champion, I believe, in the US. He really kind of kickstarted that whole revolution in that country with the game. And for whatever reason, templates were his thing, right? So, maybe there's something in that. It does feel like it's much more part of the lexicon for you guys than us. Like, we would definitely never reference it unless you were kind of reading a lot of golf course architecture stuff. You probably wouldn't get into it. It's a fair shout by Tom.
And those courses you mentioned, the CB and Seth Rayner courses, anytime you see a template on those, sometimes it can be a bit far-fetched, but I guess by and large, if it's centered around the concept of the green, so if it's a Redan, if it's a Biarritz, like Chicago Golf Club, Yale, Country Club of Charleston, Yeamans Hall, the list goes on and on. Those are going to be pretty true template holes. Like the Redans at those courses, the Biarritz, it's going to very well resemble what the originals may have looked like. But yeah, it's a good shout out of Tom that we, I don't know how else to put it, we get off a little bit around our template holes in the States.
Bad thing. And the intent behind it is always clearly a positive one, because it was, when you're building out the infrastructure for golf in the US, it's like, well, what am I drawing inspiration on? Well, and if you read Robert Hunt or any of the great writers, it always comes back to the great Scottish courses and the great English courses that have been around forever and a day. And they're taking some of the most provocative green sites and trying to build them in. Whether they play the same or look the same, I think, frankly, is kind of doesn't quite matter. Just one more point on the die thing, because, I've got no sample to draw on with die, limited again, like RTJ, Fazio, all that sort of stuff. How would you, my understanding as a layman on this one would be that die stuff maybe takes some of the aesthetics, a little bit of Trent Jones and Fazio with some of that kind of more recent build stuff, but it's trying to push strategy into more of a modern game a little bit more so. Is that a fair summary? I don't know.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's deception, and, each of these architects have their way of doing, I guess, three things: moving water, moving whatever loose dirt was around with the equipment they had, and then like creating a routing. If you can do those three things, you can build a golf course over and over and over and over. And when you've got dirt to play with, the question is, where do you put it? And how do you challenge the golfer through that? The way that Pete and Alice Dye did it was they just kind of make you hate yourself as a golfer. You look out into the distance and you see this tiny sliver of place to land it, and then you get up to your ball and you're like, holy shit, I have half a football field here to land it. And but after a while you start to say, hey, this is just how this guy approached design, and if I'm going to learn to be better at this, I've got to have more guts. That's kind of who Pete Dye was.
I think in closing, the man who put it best, last time the PGA, well, I guess 2 times ago that the PGA was played at the Ocean Course in 2012, there was a press conference with none other than the GOAT himself, Tiger Woods. And they asked him, what are your thoughts on the course? What are your thoughts on Pete Dye? And he said, it's a lot like TPC Sawgrass. Pete makes you think that you don't have any room. Kind of claustrophobic, but it's actually a lot of room. It's just deception, So that's what's so great about Pete. He makes you feel really, really uncomfortable out there. But realistically, if you get a couple practice rounds in, you can be very comfortable with it.
That is definitely going. That is the best impression.
Tough.
That's a lead. Good. That is so tough to follow. Tom,
Henry, thanks for the soundbite.
Yeah, thanks for this week's soundbite, brought to you by.
That was awesome, dude.
That was a world-class target impression. World-class.
I had to get it in there. So
great stuff. So Colleton River Plantation, that is your third course. Guys, I'm liking this. This feels like variation. 2 courses left. Where are you taking us?
All right. So we're going up north, and just a little caveat here. We can hit this in our honorable mentions, of which we have quite a few. But we're going to be heading up north to Pinehurst. Our first stop in North Carolina is going to be Tobacco Road. We're getting a little Mike Strantz in after Pete Dye, which is just a head spinner. But if you want to just kind of ease into things, I would get over to Charleston Muni and go play that and get a little bit of template action in. That's going to be some more real deal stuff. And that round you can get in for, I think, just under $40, which is awesome.
Really?
I hear
That's
it's a
good.
little,
Really
I
good.
hear it's a little slower there, but that's just a caveat. If you want to have potentially a long day, go play some more golf and then take advantage of the food scene in Charleston on your way up to North Carolina.
Okay.
That's what I would do.
When you say that, take
However-
advantage of the food scene, that's just like it's just a known as a bit of a mecca, right, in the area for.
Yeah, I mean, we could talk about that all day, and I'm certainly not going to. But yeah, Charleston, if you're making the drive from Hilton Head kind of up north towards North Carolina, that's going to be where you're going to want to stop to find some true kind of top class American restaurants.
Love it.
Yeah.
Okay, guys, Tobacco Road's probably in my top few courses that I am absolutely desperate to play.
Yeah,
Who's going to do the talking to this?
Sam, it's really interesting. I haven't been on Tobacco Road in forever, but I remember it like it was yesterday. If you're interested in golf course architecture, or if you hear people talking about golf course architecture and you're like, why is this guy so into this? Like it's cool. I get it. Different golf holes. It doesn't make much sense. Like, go out to Tobacco Road and we can talk after that. It's just a resetting experience on what you can do with land and pushing the boundaries. And it's not the best golf in the world. Like, I'll say it right here. And there's some exciting Strants stuff coming. I know Tot Hill Farm was just purchased in North Carolina, and that's going to be restored to Strantz's true vision in the next few years. But we've got very few of these templates, these Strants properties to work with in the United States.
He died? Because he was young when he died, wasn't he?
We'll mention Caledonia here in our honorable mentions as well. Caledonia is one of my favorites. But Sam, I'm confident in saying that there are less than 7 or 8 in the U.S.
Yeah.
I was going to say maybe up to a dozen, but yeah, it's here's the list: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So we were right in between it.
Wow.
And almost all of them.
Yeah.
2 of them in North Carolina, 3 of them in South Carolina, and then he did Monterey Peninsula, where they're at for Pebble Beach this week, and then a few in Virginia as well. So this is kind of the hotbed for Mike Strantz stuff: coastal South Carolina and then North Carolina.
Yeah. Bulls Bay is another really good shout in Charleston. It is private. It maybe is a little bit harder to get onto, but it's not impossible by any means. And again, with these courses that are rooted historically in good architecture, showing appreciation in many ways can get you on pretty easily. So yeah, I mean, there's not a whole lot to say. And Henry, I'll let you dive in here on Tobacco Road, other than it's a resetting experience. You go out there, you're looking. Some golf courses, particularly tree-lined golf courses in the Carolinas, can get you basically just thinking about what's ahead of you. What's the classic line that people say? It's right there in front of you.
Yeah.
At Tobacco Road, it's not right there in front of you. It's what's in front of you, and it's oftentimes 180, 270, 360 degree views, and you're trying to process. There are a lot of questions that you really won't have answered until you're on the green, and the questions are different. I mean, should I carry this ginormous chasm? Will it offer me the kind of payoff that I hope it will? If I don't pull this off, will I even be able to get my ball out? Will I even be able to physically get my body out? And then there are some more intricate shots that have like less nuance, and they're pretty simple, but they have just enough of that Strantz vibe where you can bring balls off of slopes and try a number of things. It's one of those rounds after getting hit in the face a little bit with Colleton River Plantation that may bring you back to earth a little bit.
Yeah, what I'll provide there is that I'm going to start like a little high level here and say that, I think in architecture, we all have our kind of hopes and dreams of what courses may look like. And by and large, I believe that, just because you can do something doesn't mean that you should do something. But that said, there are those people that are willing to push those boundaries and put some stuff out there that is going to be really novel and interesting. And that's kind of what Mike Strantz was about. And that's what Tobacco Road is. You will hear some people that play it and they'll be like, that's the best golf course I've ever played. That was unbelievable. And while I would disagree with those people, I think just simply that some people would have that sort of reaction to this sort of a golf course speaks to what Mike Strantz left, in that, you're going to play some greens that look like a freaking starfish. And you're like, this is a little crazy. But at the same time, like, it's really cool to get to hit some wedge shots and shorter clubs into greens where you're hitting into these tiny little fingers. And you can, as Walker put it, you can use all these different slopes. It's a pretty photogenic course. I'm sure some people have seen on Instagram pictures of like the 13th green and just a lot of wild stuff out there. And once again, I'm not going to go out here and say that this is like the greatest golf course ever, but it's going to run you about 125 quid. I think that getting to see something that Mike Strantz has done is a really important thing, especially to the Carolinas. And the novelty of Tobacco Road, the fact that he was willing to do some of the stuff that he did, I think is a super healthy point. Kind of on something you were mentioning earlier, Sam, that, we get into this group think with golf course architecture, and we all talk about, it needs to be wide and let's take away trees. And we talk about Corin Crenshaw and Gil Hansen. That stuff's all fantastic and it's all true. But experiencing something that's a little bit on the edges every now and then, I think, is a great thing, and it's really important. And Tobacco Road is some of the best of that to me.
Yeah, I sense that Tobacco Road's doesn't matter who you are, the first time you play, it's going to leave you looking at golf course design in a different way. It's provocative. And, everyone I know, well, most people I know absolutely loved it. And there's one guy who just didn't get it at all. And I think that probably speaks to its quality. Just the fact that it leaves people with those kind of polarizing feelings.
And I love that about it, because you go talk to someone about it and, it's almost when you play a golf course that you enjoy so much and that you think is really good and you kind of know is really good, it's almost challenging to talk to someone about it because, let's throw out an example. Like, you go play North Berwick and then you ask someone else who plays it and you're like, hey, what'd you think? You're almost a little nervous because you're like, I don't want to get in an argument right now. What happens if this guy says, oh, I hate North Berwick? Tobacco Road, if someone came to me and said that they hate the place, I'd be like, I can understand why that is. And I'd love to hear more about what it didn't do for you. And then if someone said to me, this is the best golf course I've ever played, similarly, I would say, okay, maybe I don't fully agree, but I can understand where you're coming from. And I'd love to hear that. So just, if nothing else, a course that provides a bit of discourse, I think, is a healthy thing in the industry.
100%. 100%.
Sam, Tom, do you guys like to sit on a course for 3, 4, 5 days before you create an opinion about it? Or do you kind of have an idea right when you walk off?
I don't think any of us have a choice. Yeah.
So the reality is that the way that we structure what we do is often, at most, we'll have one day somewhere. At worst, sometimes it's 4 hours on site, and we've got to be gone.
But lifting it out of the cookie jar sort of sphere of anything to do with that, just in golf generally, I think there's a very big difference between first plays and repeats as well. So I think, ideally you'd play somewhere loads. But if you just play, I think there's a lot of courses where I look at them differently after 7 or 8 rounds than I did after the first. Pretty much all, I would say. And that can work good or bad as well, I would add. Sometimes the first play is the best play you're ever going to get. And sometimes the 1000th round is the best.
I'll throw a soft teaser in here where we've been working on some stuff along those lines with some. We're not super into rankings necessarily. It kind of goes back to what I was saying about this concept of sense of place, house theory. How good is a golf course within itself? And I've come up with this sort of algorithm to rate some courses kind of on that metric. And one of the big numbers in there is, what I referred to as a trend over time, which is, if you play a course 10 times, was it a 90 the first time? And is it now a 94? Like, to me, that's a very big thing for a golf course. If it gets better over time, it should get some points for that. Whereas you play it the first time and it's a 90, and now you've played it 10 times and it's like an 82. To me, that detracts a little bit from a golf course. It's like that restaurant that if it's good every single time and you're still excited about going back, that's an awesome thing. Whereas if you go the first time, it was pretty good, and then the fourth time in, you don't want to go again. To me, that's a knock on it.
I think
Yeah,
I think for us, most things, most post-war things for Britain, tends to be. I mean, it's a sweeping generalization, but most post-war, apart from if you think in the last sort of 10, 15 years, certainly 50s to 70s, 80s was something you could play, and you're like, okay, I played that. I'm not sure I'd go back again. I think the ultimate course, which is the one that, I mean, I've still not played it enough to comment on this, but I hear it from everybody, is the old course. The one that you can play it once and you kind of like, yeah, I get it. And kind of the first time you play it, you're so in awe of the situation and the history and everything around it that you just enjoy it nonetheless. But every successive time that you play it, you realize that it's, oh, right, I can't put my ball there either. Oh, I can't put my ball there. There's where I need to go. And it kind of builds this huge picture in your head of, it's so subtly different every time you play it. And whereas, like you say, most of them, a lot of the stuff now that we get, that you just kind of get it. Yeah, I've seen that.
Yeah. We could go on this for quite a long time, actually, and I'm adamant we won't. But I would.
Damn, I got
totally
you.
agree. No, it's a great shout. It's a great shout, but I am mindful. But it is. We should definitely do something about first plays and repeats as well. Like it's a great topic. Like it's
more podcasts to come between the tie and cookie jar. So 100%. If anyone's enjoying this, there'll be more.
Okay.
We'll separate and break them into
closing it. So we've had four architects. We've had a mix of public and private. We've had we've been all
I'm
over
going to
the
wrap
show.
us up here.
Yeah.
And I'm I'm going to go into this one softly because the name has been thrown out a couple times and not in the most positive of lights, but I'm going to do my best here to spin things because this is a place that I am super passionate about. And as we've saved a few dollars here on getting to some, accessible privates, as we'll call it, and then also a little bit of public golf, we are going to wrap up at Pinehurst number 2. And I do truly believe I've been really fortunate to play in some different countries as well, but particularly around the States, played a lot of really good golf. And when Pinehurst number 2 is good, now, as you said earlier, like it can take a lot of time. I should say that almost every time I've played it, in fact, I think it is every time I've played it, it's been in competition. So it's either you just don't really care how long it takes or it's going to be a little bit quicker. But
is that the North-South Amateur?
North-South Amateur. And yeah, we played, we played the high school championship there one time, our state high school championship. I played a U.S. Amateur there one year. And so that changes things a little bit. But from a course that, although if you're a 22 handicap or something, it's probably not going to be super fun. When you actually get to know the place and you break it down, you can run the ball up. You can putt the ball around the greens, which I'm not much of a chipper, so I do putt the ball around the greens. There aren't a bunch of forced carries. Like if you're a 10 handicap, this is a much more approachable golf course than a lot of other places are going to be. And the true genius to number 2, I could talk about it all day, but I'll try to just encapsulate it in a couple simple points, which is that, it is kind of the OG Donald Ross thing to go see in the States. I believe if, Ross grew up at Royal Dornick. And so if you get the chance to play Dornick and number 2 and really put your head around it and think about what he probably learned from Dornick and took to 2, it's a really cool thought piece. The final thing that I'll say is, as I alluded to with the fact that a 10 handicapper can run the ball up, they can putt it around the greens, they can play it. For a scratch golfer or a +2 handicap or whatever it is, a lot of that stuff I actually think provides a little bit more challenge than just the typical aerial American pursuit. And so while most really, quote unquote, good or difficult golf courses, in fact, diverge good and bad players significantly, I actually think that number 2 converges them a lot. And I think that that's really, really unique of hard golf. And it's just a place that you can send a 10 handicap out there and tell them to have fun and go see what they can do. You could, any day of the week, just about, if you told them, hey, there's going to be a U.S. Open played out here in 3 days, they could tighten up the greens, firm up the golf course, take a little bit of water off of it, and it would be ready to go. Pinehurst itself it really is, it's probably one of those places you hear a lot about and you kind of wonder, like, is it really all it's cracked up to be? Now, by no means, but bear with me, I am not trying to compare Pinehurst to St. Andrews, but I believe that St. Andrews is the kind of place similarly that you would hear about of, it's this magical place. It's the home of the game. You would wonder
There's reverence
when I
in
get
the US, isn't there? There's massive reverence for Pinehurst.
I think that some people would certainly hear that and wonder, when I get there, is it really going to be that great? And for me, having been to St. Andrews, I thought that the town itself was just unbelievable. That you can feel the culture. There's good food. The bars are amazing. The golf is incredible. Pinehurst is similar to me. The golf is really, really neat. You have that true sense of place that we've mentioned multiple times today that you're trying to capture. There's some really good old school restaurants. And number 2 is objectively the crown jewel. And this is kind of where, keeping it a little bit lower on the budget throughout the trip, we're going to go ahead and pony up the $400 or $500 that it's going to cost, top off the trip. We're going to finish it off as well with, if you play number 2 and you get the right deal, there's this little course that Gil Hance put in 5 years ago, called the Cradle, which is like,
right,
I think
the music.
I think
stuff.
the longest hole is 80 or 90 yards, but go get your head beat in. If it's a hard day at number 2, have a bunch of 4 putts, ping pong it around the greens, and then finish your trip off at the Cradle, have a couple stiff beverages. You can grab a shower at Pinehurst before driving back to Charlotte. It's going to be an hour, 40 minutes, and you can get out of there. So that's our final course of the trip. Walker, I'm interested to hear if you've got any color to add around there, but those are my thoughts on the Cradle and number 2.
Nothing to add on number 2 that would add any more value. And Henry's spoken passionately about 2 for a long time. I mean, the golf course is what it is. It's really good. You can overcomplicate it. It's easy to get mad at from time to time, but it's one of those that just kind of keeps knocking down the door. On this primary trip, we have hit, and these are just the notables here: Donald Ross, Walter Travis, Alistair McKenzie, Pete Dye, Mike Strantz, Corin Crenshaw, who I'm giving slight credit for the restoration of number 2, Tom Doak, and Chris Spence. And then, so, we got through this list. Obviously, there were others that didn't make it, and we say, okay, well, what are we missing here? What could we have possibly tied in if we had more money or more courses? And, I personally am looking for a little bit more Rainer. We've talked to Kyle France on the pod. I think he's just doing unbelievable work. King Collins Golf, Dan Proctor and Dave Axland have this wonderful course in Tennessee, and then Riley Johns and Keith Rebb. Those are kind of the highlights that didn't make the primary list this year, but I'd be happy to go into some of those courses as well. We could do it another time. Yeah. But I think all encompassing, you've got 5 courses, really 7, potentially 8 in that primary list that will knock your socks off, will be a really comprehensive trip to the Carolinas and a representative of, what the land in the Carolinas has to offer.
I think it's an interesting one. The old me, I'd say maybe the 5-6 years ago, Tom, if you'd have said where you're going to go on a golf trip, probably would have thought Florida or California. Pretty much it. I wouldn't really have ventured far from there. You reeled off a whole bunch in North and South Carolina. And of course, you got a few more on the way as well. You've got some notables with the number 10 at Pinehurst. You've got
Pinehurst 10, you got Old Barnwell, Tree Farm. Walker mentioned Kyle Franz. We did a podcast about a course that he has coming up called Broom Sedge. That's going to be really neat. The Carolinas, the land, just starting there, I think is a bit underrated for golf, and what's already there, I think also gets, maybe underrated is the wrong term, but overlooked. There's some overlooked stuff. We haven't even mentioned a ton of other names that are really solid, but the weather is another thing to call out, that you can go to the Carolinas this time of year. It's a bit of a crapshoot. You might get 10 degree converting to Celsius here. You might get 5 to 10 degree weather, but on the right day, you might catch it 15, even pushing 18 degrees.
I'll take 10 now. I'll take 5 and run. Okay, this time of year.
There's some chances that you're going to get really good weather this time of year. And there's some really cool stuff. As Walker put it, there are a ton of great architects to dabble in the Carolinas. And maybe most importantly, there's one name that hasn't come up today, but Tom Fazio, no Foz. So we're going to stay away from that.
Banned from the Carolinas.
No, there's plenty of Foz, but not on our itinerary.
There's an interesting point though. Because like I don't think it's something that we think about in Britain. If people are going to fly over to do a Carolina trip, when is the best time to do it? Because there are times where it's not good, maybe.
Really, you can do this trip year round, which is the best. That's the short answer. If you really want to make this into a valued trip, I would recommend that you do this during our winter.
Oh, really?
Spring and fall is just the same, but really like a nice fall in the Carolinas is really good. You know, I've talked before on some of the Twitter threads. You know, I think we can all agree that fine fescue, you know, firm turf with sand bottom is just about as good as it gets as a golfer. I mean, you've got really nice lies, you know, good club turf interaction, some nice bounce to the fairways. But coming up in a close second is Bermuda grass that's dormant and healthy with a good root structure and a sand base. And in most all these golf courses, you're going to have a sand base. And even if you catch it on a little bit more like a pretty wet day, this golf is just as exciting and worth playing, which I think is worth a mention. You know, you're going to see rates increase in the summer, particularly at the public courses, just because they can afford to charge more. But, you know, I think you could have just as good of a trip in the fall or the winter as you could in the summer. It's quite hot in the summer, too.
Yeah, it gets really hot in the summer. You don't want to come in the summer. My strong recommendation would be just kind of straddle the winter, like maybe late November, kind of between, I guess for y'all, Thanksgiving doesn't really hold a lot of water, but around Thanksgiving time, honestly, couldn't be the worst idea ever because people are going to be pretty busy in the States with that holiday. And, you know, if someone were to come over from the UK, there wouldn't be all that much going on. That would certainly be a good weather time. And then, you know, as I mentioned, you could come at the end of January and you very well might get very good weather. If you get unlucky, you could catch some colder days and get some frost delays. But I would say, you know, early middle of March would also be a very good time to look at because I would say 8 times out of 10, you're going to catch really solid weather around that time. And all the things Walker alluded to, you get some really great ground conditions at that time of year as well to play some of these courses.
What a brilliant bit of travel wisdom. And if I'm honest, the idea of putting a budget on this, when you hear people talk of Pinehurst, particularly Pinehurst 2, with almost messianic terms, it's kind of puts you under the gun to think about whether it's really worth it. And actually, the real proof point in that is the fact that they've given you $1,000, and it's like, yeah, do you know what? If this is what I was living by, this is exactly what I'd do, and I'd still pony up for Pinehurst 2 as well within that. Any further, we're going to make this a Joe Rogan length episode, and I think we end on that. Like, you guys put a ton of effort into that, and I think massive thank you from me and Tom. Like, it's so illuminating to hear about these courses when, you know, loads of those I'd not heard about, some I'm desperate to go to, one I have real nice fond memories of. It's just really exciting to hear about that sort of stuff, and the idea that you can piece together something without needing tons of privileged access. Yeah, okay, $1,000 is a lot for 5 rounds of golf, but if you're going a long way, and it's, you know, that's just a lot of effort. So I think big thank you on behalf of the listeners as well, really, for piecing that together. And I really hope people do go out and do that because, like, the way you've sold that trip there, like, boy, where do I sign?
Thank you, guys. I mean, first off, the first part of this whole thing is talking about it on both ends, both on Cookie Jar and the tie. The second step is actually do it in practice. So we gotta book our flights over to you guys and let you guys show us, I guess the 10 courses that we covered nearly, and then
well, that's it.
We'll do it on our end as well.
We'll 100% be playing and teeing it up. I mean, based on some of the stuff you've been saying, particularly Henry, I was half expecting you to be playing early September in St Andrews, to be honest with you. So.
I might make it over for that. I don't
know if the selectors are. I mean, we're going to be at the Walker Cup. Can't wait for that. So who knows if you can get over for that? Maybe we could have a little event or something. Perhaps
a podcast Walker Cup.
Yeah, we could play some golf either side of it. You could assemble a side, and we could assemble a side, and we could have at it.
That's a heck of an idea, for sure.
Cool.
Guys. Yeah, totally, guys. This was a ton of fun. Let's keep our heads together on other sorts of topics. I think there's all sorts of stuff that we can do, but let's keep thinking about, you know, some more more things that we can get going back and forth. I think people are going to really enjoy us doing these sorts of round tables. And again, kind of a world of opportunity of things that we can talk about. So let's be in contact on it all.
Cheers, guys. Thank you for that.
Watch this.